Connor was 16 when his life was turned upside down. After his first relationship ended, he felt off but didn't know why. It came as a shock when a GP visit revealed he was living with severe depression. It got worse before it got better, culminating in a suicide attempt that almost robbed him of an awesome future. Like flicking a switch, waking up in hospital to a second chance fundamentally shifted his approach to life. But the road to becoming the man he is today hasn't been a straight line. Now a personal trainer, Connor lives to help people build themselves up, finding purpose in community. This is Connor Tarrant. Welcome to Young Blood, the volunteer video podcast dedicated to young men's mental health. I'm your host, Cal McPherson, and this is a platform for young men and their loved ones to share lived experience stories and show that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Suicide is the number one killer of young people, and changing that starts with speaking up. So let's do it. This episode is proudly brought to you by Credit Union SA, a South Australian business that believes in the value of promoting mental health, working together with us to help save lives. Sharing lived experience stories is a major part of making a positive change, and we couldn't bring you these podcasts without their support. This show touches on some tough topics that may provoke strong emotions. If you find anything in this chat distressing, please do whatever you need to do to look after yourself. Connor, what was going on for you at 16?
At 16, that was when my life changed. That was when I got, I guess, the rude awakening that I wasn't the same person anymore. It was the end of a long-term relationship that triggered me, or that brought awareness to what was going on. And to myself, I was completely oblivious. So at 16 years old, I was going through the day-to-day motions of, I guess, any 16-year-old, getting your license, going to school, studying for year 11, 12 at that point. And that it got dawned on me that I was not happy. I was not happy all the time, or I was miserable, to be direct about it. And I thought it was a lie. And that came from my partner, who became my ex-partner pretty quickly.
What do you think was a lie?
I thought it was a lie that I was miserable. I thought I was okay. I thought everything was okay. I guess I wouldn't go as far as to say that is a lie now. At that point, I believed it was, because that was the argument of no, I'm fine. I'm happy. I'm good. You don't need to, don't worry about me. I'm good. I've got you. I love you, whatever. Things are great. And that ending kind of was the straw that broke said camel's back. That was the tipping point where I started to go downhill, and I had to have that rude awakening that things weren't the same anymore.
So were you relying on that person for your happiness back then?
Yes and no. I was reliant on them because it was all I knew. Getting into a relationship at such a young age, 13, going on 13 years old when it started, to then pretty much majority of my high school years being with that person. And not that dating was a big thing or has ever been a big thing for me, but having something so, I guess, precious as a relationship to suddenly come to an end, and having to then navigate what life looked like. Over the years throughout high school, you always have friends, you make friends, you meet new people come and go, friendships don't last, that sort of stuff. But I'd actively pushed relationships away. People that were good for me, I'd pushed them away because they weren't beneficial to my relationship. And it's not that they genuinely weren't, as I believe they weren't, and I was convinced that they weren't beneficial to my relationship. They were taking time away from my relationship. So then having to navigate that and make amends with people and realize that I was dependent on that, it was hard.
And when you're a teenager, you feel things so intensely and you don't have anything to compare against because you just don't really have the life experience yet. So you're not sure that things are going to get better, and you'll move on and you'll look back on it and you'll reflect on it differently because you haven't had the chance to do that yet. So we can really feel like it's the end of the world when we're a teenager and we've got relationships breaking down and drama going on. And I remember that being some of the most intense time of life was school age, like being really young and just thinking like there was so much writing on relationships and reading so much into it, more so that even than becoming an adult. Was that?
Yeah, I mean, if I think back to, I guess, my friends group at that age, they were all, happy, full of life, just being what I guess teenagers are at that point. Then as we progressed down like the path, like the story, I guess, of our friendships and our relationships at that point, I started to see them go downhill. I started to see them encounter their own issues, their own problems, their own mental health struggles. And it was kind of weird in a way, because whilst my friends are older and now going through the thick of it, I was younger and I had already been through it. And well, not so much been through it. I'd already sort of been through the thick of it and now navigating it, whereas they were just coming into it. And so it was really like odd trying to then help them through their struggles. Not that it was a problem, but it was like looking at them as if I was kind of looking at myself at the same time and going, was I like that? When I went downhill and you guys were there for me, was I like that? And sometimes having to take that, I guess, that back seat and sort of reflect on my own actions as well. And then have that full circle moment of like, oh man, like I'm sorry if that's how I was. It was a very like strange feeling in a way.
What was your experience of depression, coming to terms with that, and then where did that lead?
That was hard. Like, and I think if anyone said that it was easy, I'd almost call them out and say they were lying, because up until even when I approached my mother and said, hey, like, I'm not feeling okay, can you make me a doctor's appointment? Which is really what snowballed it all. Was like I had this kind of something's not right. You wake up feeling sick one day and you go, I'm not feeling well today, and you know that something's wrong. It was kind of like that. I woke up one morning, I'm like, something doesn't feel right. I need to figure out what the heck's going on. Didn't think at that point that it was mental health related. Didn't think that it was like the warning signs of depression or anything. So when I went to mum that morning and said, hey, like, can you make me a doctor's appointment? Something's not feeling right. And asking, well, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. I just don't feel right. And I got the doctor's appointment, and they sit you down and they give you a piece of paper and it's a questionnaire, and you're ticking all these boxes and writing these answers. And I remember I looked at that answer sheet, that quiz sheet, and before giving it back to the doctor, I read it and I thought, this is like all just normal stuff. Again, I didn't think that there was actually anything wrong with me, like mentally. I didn't think I was depressed. I didn't think that I had signs of depression or anything. And mum and dad knew. They knew that something was off, but they didn't really suspect the same thing. So I guess they kind of had the same sort of similar sort of feelings as me. Is that when the doctor read it, he said, you've got severe signs of depression and anxiety. It was like my whole world just changed color. We look around this room and it's red and it's white and we can depict the colors. Well, if we're sitting in that doctor's office and you're the doctor, my whole world just turned gray. You ask me what color the room is and I'm saying it's black and white. And it really like brought this whole dark sort of aura over my life. And it was just this realization that, oh man, things are not the way that I thought they would be. And so it's almost like I look at some situations now where I see people at a later age get diagnosed with like depression or ADHD or whatever it might be, and they have this realization moment of that's the answer to all my questions. But then it becomes their identity. And I reflect on that and I look at that and go, man, I can't stand when people sort of make something like this. That's who they've always been. It's not like this magic diagnosis has changed who they are. But I look at that and go, man, I hate how people make things their identity. And then I go, hang on a minute. I did the same thing. When I got hit with the news, like that sort of became my identity. Not, like I intended on making it my identity, but that's how people viewed me. That's how I portrayed myself, how people viewed me, as I was the depressed person. I was sad, and
how you viewed yourself.
And that's how I started viewing myself.
So was it useful having that label?
you know what? In hindsight, yeah, it was useful having that label, because I had to then learn new life lessons. It sort of forced me to learn things.
And your parents had to
Parents
come
had to
along with
learn.
you.
Yeah, they had to learn how to navigate it. And, you know, I can't say what it was like for other people when they've been given like news that their mental health is not okay and how their parents have navigated it. But honestly, my parents became like super parents in a way, and they wanted to be there and protect their son, and because they knew the flow on effects that could occur, especially given the timing of everything with all the, I guess, negative stuff that was going on in and around the community. Like at that time, the community I grew up in had like an absolute tear on youth suicides. Like the numbers were ridiculous for such a short space of time. And yeah, I nearly became one of those numbers. I nearly became a statistic to my town. And that's something that I don't think any parent should have to deal with, that, nor friend, nor family member should ever have to deal with a loved one becoming a statistic. And I say that now as a 26-year-old person, that nobody should have to go through that. But I nearly was that. And they, like I said, they became super parents to the extent where they were always there, and it almost became overbearing. And that's the balance. That's trying to find the balance of, and finding the new normalities in life. Getting asked all the time, every morning, every night, a couple times a day, like, are you okay? Is there anything you want to talk about? And I had to sort of put my foot down and establish new boundaries with my parents, because they're parents. They always want to be there, right? They always want to look after you. They always want to make sure that their son or their daughter is safe and sound and away from evil and whatnot. And I kind of had to establish those boundaries of going, look, I really appreciate you guys being there for me and wanting to make sure I'm okay. But realistically, if I need to talk, I will come and talk to you. Like, please stop pushing it on me, because it's just pushing me away further.
But then you weren't okay.
But then I wasn't okay. And sort of, I've always been a very open person to communication, and I've always been open to talking about things. That's who I always was. I always had not the loudest voice in the room, but would always stand up for what's right. And then having to do that for myself was the hardest, or one of the hardest parts of that. So saying that I'll come talk to you if I was okay, that's great. I would have, and I did, but it was always too late. There was always something that had happened that then led me to having to have that conversation. It wasn't a case of, okay, here's the warning signs, now go have a chat. It's, here's the warning signs, here's the action, action's complete, consequences are in play. Cool, let's go have a chat now, which is too late. It's far too late.
So you felt incapable of articulating your feelings?
It was more a case of, okay, nobody knows me better than myself, so let me try and navigate this pathway myself, so that way I can articulate it, so I can then talk about my feelings. And I would say that at this point, that was the mistakes that I made, was that I would always try to fix or self-medicate the issue first before seeking help from somebody else. And once I seeked help from somebody else, or even if that, I guess, that self-medicating process, and I don't necessarily mean like with drugs or alcohol or anything when I say self-medicating, I just mean mentally, you know, self-medicating that issue. Once that had sort of failed, it's like, man, now I need to sort of get help from an outside pathway.
You were just a kid.
Exactly. 9 times out of 10, I'd say that my processes were wrong. Like, if I had of just, and I think that's kind of one of the things that I live with is like, if I had of just, the what if, you know, if I had of just spoken to somebody, if I had of just had the conversation about what was going on at this time, if I had of just done exactly what I said I would do, and say, hey mum, can I have a chat? Hey dad, can I have a chat? Whatever. Then, hey friend, can I have a chat?
You had to drill down to exactly what stopped you doing that. How would you describe it?
Stubbornness, in as much as, like I said before, that nobody knew me better than I knew myself. So it was the stubbornness of like, no, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to work this out. And again, I was young. I was a teenager. And I think most teenagers go through that stage, regardless of what age it is. They go through a stage of like, no, like this is my life. I'm in control. I'm in the driver's seat. You know, nobody knows me better than I myself. I can do what I want and get away with it, whatever it might be. And I think it was definitely stubbornness, and I'd say, I guess, to make it look a little bit nicer, determination to actually be better for myself personally.
Mm. How's it manifesting day to day in your behavior and your experience of going about life?
Now or then? Then it grew. Like, it didn't matter what I did, it grew. So the feelings, the anxieties, the pressures, they were all in my head. And every situation that I was in, for the most part, were situations that everybody goes through, whether it be work, whether it be life, relationships, etc. Like, the anxieties and the harshness that I felt just got harder and harder. And with every negative turnabout, whether it be an argument with somebody, whether it be that I'm not feeling great on that particular day, whether it's my anxieties through the roof, it just got harder and manifested and grew into this great big ball of crap, basically, that at one point it exploded. And when it exploded, I had to deal with the consequences of, not dealing with my issues. I tried to deal with them, going to counseling and trying to open up to friends and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it exploded into what nearly turned me into a statistic. So, yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's such a weird day, man. Like, I sit back and I think about it now. I don't remember the day. Like, I remember parts of it. It was, at that point, I was looking for anything to just basically break the day up, whether it be, getting drunk at some point and just forgetting about a few hours. The doctor had me on a sleeping medication to help with my anxiety. Now, it wasn't to put me to sleep, it was just to help mellow me out. And I'd just been sick, and so I had something that had codeine in it, and I knew, like, the effects of codeine, and it was just kind of like, it was like one thing just kind of led to another. I remember I went and had lunch with some friends, I'm pretty sure. And then I went home and I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to have a sleep sort of thing, and just took some codeine, one after the other. And before you know it, a whole sachet was gone. And Mum came home and found me asleep on the couch. But I wasn't asleep. I was kind of like in this lucid state, mumbling things and whatever. And I still have my motorbike license, but I had a motorbike at the time. And Mum came home and she sort of woke me up. And this, mind you, like, this part, Mum coming home or not, this is what she's told me. I don't remember this. I don't recall any of this. She's come home and I've woken up mumbling something about something. I don't know what it was. And I've gone, oh, I'm going for a ride, and I've grabbed my gear and went to go walk out the door. And that's all I know. Next thing you know, I'm in and out of consciousness in the hospital with Mum and Dad standing at the end of my bed. That's where I had my rude awakening. That's where I sort of got the jolt to the system of going, something's got to change. Things have got to change.
So did you OD?
Yeah, I overdosed. And the doctors didn't even know what to do, because what I'd taken, they'd never seen anybody do that before. So, not that I was trying to make an impression, but the fact that the doctors didn't even know what to do, I must have really been in a state. And it was so it's not like I was violent. I know that I wasn't violent. I was been told that I wasn't violent, and I've never been a violent person. So it's not like it triggered, some deep feelings and emotions to come out that caused me to be violent. But it was so weird waking up the next morning, sort of sitting up, wondering what's going on, hearing the beeping, and I knew that I was in hospital, but hearing all the beeping and waking up and then looking outside my stall, I guess, in the hospital, and seeing a security guard sitting there, and I was like, okay, and he was only sitting there for me, and the only reason why he was sitting there for me is because if I tried to leave or if I tried to do anything, they were taking me straight to the mental health ward. They were taking me 3 hours up the road to the mental health ward to get me clean. So that was part of the rude awakening. The other part happened whilst I was in and out of consciousness. That I remember.
So you didn't have a conscious plan to die that day, but
I had
almost went
plans.
that way.
I had plans for if and when, but I didn't have plans for that particular day.
But you had suicidal thoughts leading up to that.
I had suicidal thoughts on the daily. I was so prepared to not be here anymore. I had a toolbox. I had a whole kit of it had my suicide note in it. I was planned. I was prepared. And I think that was kind of me trying to accept the fact that I was, or trying to make myself accept the fact that I didn't want to be here, whilst realistically my brain was fighting it, or something in me was fighting the thought of being here. But I had everything, whether, things. I don't want to sort of get into the nitty gritty of what was in there, but there were things in there, different ways of which that I could have taken my life. And, like I said, I had my suicide note in it. And it was even right down to what I wanted people to remember about me. And mind you, this is the first time I've ever said it out loud. No one's ever known that existed. And I think the hardest thing to think about when I think about that particular piece, I don't even know what happened to it. In as much as I moved out of home, and it wasn't for a few years, after a few years living out of home, that it kind of crossed my mind that existed. And I remember thinking, did I get rid of that before I moved out of home? Did I have mum and dad found that and they've just never spoken to me about it? I'm sure when they listen to this that they might even bring it up, but I can't even remember what happened to it. I can't even remember if I consciously got rid of it and tried to move on with my life, or if it's something that I forgot about in the move, and it was found by somebody who probably shouldn't have found it, because I could only imagine the shock factor on if that had been the case.
What do you remember about being that version of you?
I went through so many different versions of myself in that time period that it's sort of hard to keep up with what I remember, in as much as I went through the depressive state. I went through the isolation state, where I didn't want to be around anybody. If I was around people, it was only because I knew that I had to be around people, and I just felt like an outsider in around friends that I'd known for 10 plus years, who are still friends to this day. And so going through those phases, I remember that. But I remember when I came to after I'd tried to take my life, I had this, I guess, I don't want to say epiphany kind of moment, just more or less this moment of going, no, this is not the life for you. And I mean, I'd already had those thoughts, but they were thoughts of taking my own life, that this lifetime is not the life for me. Whereas this was, no, this is not the life you want to live. And I wanted to start making a change. I wanted to start helping rather than being a hindrance. I wanted to be part of the solution, not part of the problem anymore. So that's what I remember the most, was actually the changing of times, was when I consciously made the decision to make a change.
What do you think brought that feeling about?
Uh, I think it was um, seeing my parents again through glazed eyes at the end of my hospital bed and seeing how sad and how confused and how upset they were at what was going on. And I sort of, it's the closest thing that I would ever say that I've gotten to having, I guess, uh, like a guardian angel sort of thing. Is like, I remember, and it could have been because of the way my brain was at the time, but I remember in my like lucid state, I remember I seeing my grandmother who had passed away. I remember I saw her, and it was just kind of like she was looking at me and sort of telling me that it's going to be okay. And in that moment, it was kind of like the bravest I'd felt, the most confident that I'd felt in a long time, genuinely confident. I masked my depression and how I was feeling with confidence at that time, but it was the first time in a good year and a half that I'd actually felt confident and I'd felt brave, and I felt like I've got this. I've got this locked down. I can fix this now.
Like flicking a switch.
Yeah, it was like that light bulb moment of like this is how I'm going to get out of this. Is I'm gonna in a selfish way, but also in a way that wasn't that was productive. Was like, I'm going to help myself by helping others. Helping others is what I've always gotten joy and pride out of, and has always made me feel better about who I am. Not for selfish reasons, but it's just always made me feel like that's who I am. Like that's the person I'm supposed to be. So at that time it was like, okay, that's the awakening moment. That's the point where I go, I can do this. I can help others. That's how I can help myself and get myself out of this position.
Wow. So black and white from one end of the spectrum to the other.
It was, but it didn't come without difficulty. You know, it wasn't like,
I was going to ask, was it linear from there?
no, it was anything but linear, because I still had to navigate those emotions. I still had to navigate the traumas and the feelings that I was feeling, and my relationship issues, and I still had to navigate all of that. So it wasn't
all the reasons why you ended up in that place.
Exactly. It's not like I said, okay, cool, this is what I'm going to do now. All of these problems no longer exist. It doesn't happen like that. And I think life goes on. And I know that sounds like a very black and white statement, but life goes on and is going to continue happening. The good and the bad is going to continue to happen. So you've got to then try to navigate the new things that are happening, whether they're good or they're bad. So I've had this great moment, the first great moment that I've had in a while, but then I've got to navigate, okay, all the stuff that I didn't deal with, but then I've also got to navigate all the new stuff that's coming on board, these new challenges, these new obstacles in my way.
And the great moment was waking up and feeling confident.
That was the great moment. You know, as bad as it was also the great moment. But then it didn't get easier, but it didn't exactly get harder unless I made it harder. And I guess that was part of it. Is before that, I was making life harder consciously. It was almost like I was intentionally making life harder just to feel anything. But then after that, I wasn't. I was making life harder, but it was sort of, sorry, I misspoke. Before that, I wasn't conscious about making life harder, because it was something where it's like I wasn't in control of this vessel. Whereas after that moment of going, okay, I've got this, I was actively trying to make life harder to make life easier. I had to make life harder and navigate all those past issues and navigate all the new issues. So I was intentionally trying to make it harder and fix that stuff.
Yeah, because you decided that you did want to live and you were trying to grow and develop and actually become someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Better. And like there's peaks and valleys to it, you know. You have the highs and you have the lows. And I did revisit, like, not as bad, but I did revisit that negative side of things unintentionally. It just kind of sprung it on me. I was at work one day. This was after I'd moved from New South Wales to Queensland. I was on the phone to my dad because he became, like I said, a super parent. He became, mum had her run-ins with mental health over the years, And so she got it. Dad didn't really get it as such, but he made so much effort to understand and to get it and to become like that real person that I could go to, you know. And I called my dad when I was at work and I broke down in tears and I said, Dad, I feel like I'm going back downhill again and I don't want to go there. I'm scared.
How long after was that?
It was about a year. Like it was kind of crazy. So I've just tried to take my life. I've gone to my counseling appointment that I was supposed to have that day. That was the only reason why they let me out of the hospital. It wasn't like it wasn't for any other reason other than the fact that I had a counseling appointment that day that they let me out of the hospital, or else I still probably would have been going to the mental health wing. But what was it? It was about a year, I'd say a year and a half. So I spent about a year and a half just working with different youth groups in my community. And then I did that for a little while and I said, okay, I think now it's time for me to make a change. I think now it's time for me to sort of really put me first in a way. Not that everything was fixed and everything was okay, but I said, okay, what do I need to do? Well, I need to move. I need to move and have a fresh start. And mum and dad love me. You know, they it's not like it's a hard family to live in. You know, they love me, but they'll say, "We love you, but don't ever move back here." And it's because they know that it just wasn't a productive place for me. It was until it wasn't, and it served its purpose. But yeah, then I moved out of home about like I said, year and a half later, and again had to re-navigate those new issues, those good and those bad issues, of okay, I'm not at home anymore. I'm not at my safe space. I'm in the unfamiliar. I've got to actually start being an adult. And I was only 19 years old when that happened. So it was a really like crazy year, just working voluntarily. I was working with youth groups because everyone was sort of sick and tired of seeing youths drop off the face of the map. You know, I remember this was one of those things where this should have been if taking my own life wasn't, or trying to take my own life wasn't the turning point, there was one other time that I would say should have been a turning point for me. And I guess in a way it was at the same time. And we always look at like hindsight and think, what if, and think about in hindsight this and hindsight that. But I can't help to think that if I had have done something that I really wanted to do, that somebody would still be on this earth. You know, and I live with that. And I know subconsciously that wasn't my fault, but I can't help to think I had someone when I was working with the youth groups, when I was working with the mental health organizations. I had a friend that I worked with, and we weren't friends prior to. We became friends throughout. I had friends that she came to me one day and she said, "Hey, can you give me a lift home?" And that was the last time I saw her. I said no, because it's not like I had something else on that I really had to get to. I just had something else on, and for some reason, I just my brain couldn't make it all work out. I said no. Again, not because I didn't like her or anything. It was just because at that time I had something going on, and realistically I could have. And I live with that thinking, what if I had have, maybe, because she'd never asked me anything like that. We were never close like that. But I can't help but think, what if that was her reaching out and me not recognizing that that could have been somebody reaching out? And that's what helps me live with going, you never know what somebody else is going through. It's that living with that, I guess, little bit of regret, that little bit of guilt, that what if I had have done something different, if that had have saved that person's life? You know, it's a hard thing to try and live with, knowing that I can't even ask the questions of, would this have changed? Would this have changed the outcome? Maybe it's a narrative I wrote for myself to make myself be a little bit more human, but that's kind of, you know, it's one of those hard things that you try and learn a lesson from.
Well, they're answers that you can never get, and that's the hardest part about suicide
Yeah.
is the why, and you can just go round and round and round forever on that and torture yourself, and ultimately you're the only one who can accept that it wasn't up to you and everyone's responsible for themselves. But that's little consolation when you lose someone to suicide.
Absolutely.
That logical explanation of, oh, it wasn't your fault, but I could have done this differently. You could have done that. I could have said something. I could have whatever, and that list goes on and on and on. And you know what that is, and you have to deal with those thoughts, and you have to be the one who ultimately releases yourself from that. And that there's so many thousands and thousands of people who walk around with a degree of that guilt or that regret that you're talking about. I have it as well for losing my mate, and hadn't spoken to him for weeks before that happened because he was living in another state, and we would often have long conversations on the phone. And because back then I didn't know how to see the signs, didn't understand the urgency, and then after that happened, I was like, same thing. Like, I should have spoken to him. If he'd called me, it wouldn't have happened. That whole path, I've been down that too, and so many people have, and that's the people who get left behind by suicide. It's so difficult, especially if it's family or someone really, really close, is those unanswered questions that will never be answered.
Yeah. And I think that's like part of the hardest thing of like trying to answer the questions that'll never be answered. And I even went down that rabbit hole of trying to get answers to the questions, not with that circumstance, but with like the original triggers, trying to get answers for it. And they weren't, it's not that they weren't it's not that they were not what I wanted to hear. It's just more a case of going, the answers haven't changed. So, and it's, okay, I now need to try and fix this with what I have on hand. And sometimes
also, even if you found the answers, what would you do with them? What would they change when the person's still gone? And then
I think that's the beauty of going, the answers can either be good or bad, right? And you can either change or you can learn from it. Or everything stays the same. So if we run a hypothetical, let's say I was able to get the answer to the question of like, if I had given her a lift home that day, would she still be here? Yeah, she would. Okay, cool. So now I have to deal with the guilt of the fact that I didn't do this, and so therefore I'm now feel more responsible for this. Cool. That's not exactly the answer that I wanted to hear. I kind of wanted to hear that I was guilt-free in this one. No, even if you had have done that, the outcome still would have been the same. Yeah, but what if I could have changed that though? What if we had had a conversation in that car? The outcome might still be the same, but what if I had a chance to change that? What if I had more of a chance to change that? So we can get all the answers that we want, but would it necessarily change how we feel about it? I don't think so, because our life's already moved on. We've already lived with it for so long. Maybe it might make things a little bit easier to digest in conversation, but we're still then going to wonder those what ifs.
And everyone in those very difficult circumstances has to come to terms with that at their own speed for themselves, and no one else can answer it for you. But I think just knowing that people who are bereaved by suicide all go through this and carry it with them to some degree. And even when there's a very logical explanation for why it's not their fault, and that odds on the same thing would have happened anyway, or if it wouldn't, whatever, that unanswerable question. Even if you know deep down, okay, and logically, all right, it wasn't my fault, couldn't have done anything, you're still going to have those very deep-seated feelings attached with that, and that's okay. And just knowing that you're not alone in that. There's so many people who carry something like that.
Absolutely.
And your parents very nearly carried that. And have you spoken, do they talk about this with you? Do you, now that you're a grown man, do you reflect on this?
There's a lot of things. I don't think it's like suppression, but there's a lot of things that we don't talk about. And it's not because it's hard to talk about, but it's kind of like life has moved on. And I feel like we've had so many conversations over the years that to talk about it, it's now kind of not kind of like a broken record. And even in this alone, there's things coming out of this conversation that my parents haven't heard before. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay to have the conversations with them, you know, should that arise. Because this is a very real and raw, and this is going on about things that, you know, have happened sort of after the fact as well. But to see where my parents are at now, sort of taking on that role of going, okay, we've lived through this through our son. You know, I go back to my dad in what he's done, because I really think that he's turned a new leaf. Like his life changed. Prior to me trying to take my life, mum and dad got a message from one of my friends, because I was an idiot, and I'll say that I was an idiot in as much as, if you're trying to self-harm, or if you're trying to take your own life, if you're trying to be serious about it, what kind of person, other than one that's trying to look for help, messages somebody to say, hey, can you give me a hand? Can you give me some advice on how to do this? Like, you're not going to. And
it's a cry for help.
It was a subtle cry for help. And I say that, like, you know, what kind of idiot does that? Someone that wants help. That's who. And so I've messaged a friend asking, hey, when you did this, how did you go about it? They recognized that as a cry for help. Meanwhile, I was looking for a cry for advice on how to hurt myself, basically. And to have my dad come storming through my bedroom door and pin me down and hold me and wrap me in the tightest bear hug ever, but full of love and tears, and to see really his life change as well. And then for him to take that in his stride and go, okay, I've now seen this harsh reality, had this rude awakening himself to mental health, and go, I'm going to do my part, sort of thing. So he's, you know, he actively promotes like the Are You OK Day and that kind of stuff. And, you know, anytime his local gym does charity work for mental health, he's all over it. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing. And like I said, mum had her run-ins with mental health over the years, so she was kind of aware of it. And she's always like, I've always been a mother's boy. Like that's how I've always been. So sort of talking to mum has kind of always been a little bit easier, whereas dad was always a bit harder, because he's a bit of a harder person, I suppose. But then to see him soften to that really is a very it's a very becoming kind of experience. And to see what he has done over the years to take this as part of his life now is really like amazing.
Yeah. Credit to him.
Yeah, and I think when you're depressed, when you're thinking about suicide, when you're thinking about self-harm, when you're going through these emotions, or when you're trying to suppress the pain, it doesn't just affect you. And I think this is what people with mental health struggle with the most, is like, it is a very selfish thing, and you're not in control of that. You can't change that. But there has to come a point where you realize that your actions have consequences on people more than just you. Like, and everybody wants us to be happy, but at the same time, at what cost? And you can spend your life trying to make other people happy in the hopes that it makes you happy, but you can also spend your life being miserable, and in turn you are going to make other people around you miserable. So it's like this real flow-on effect that we don't take into consideration. I think if we spend a little bit more time, if I had have taken a bit more time at that point in my life, realizing what my actions, what the consequences of that would have on other people, I think I probably would have pulled myself
But
out
it's
of it
not just
quicker.
depression, it's also being a teenager. I mean,
Yeah.
teenagers are shit at that because it's all about me, me, me. Because your
Absolutely.
brain's not developed yet and you don't get adult life yet. So you haven't reached a point where you have that maturity.
Yeah.
And then depression as well.
I think we look at everyone at that age, regardless of whether everything's hunky dory or you are going through it. We look at everyone as the enemy almost. Like everyone's out to get us. Everyone's trying to stand in my way. Where I'm a teenager, I can fight the world.
Yeah, well, you're the center of the story, and there's a lot of ego there and not a lot of self-awareness. And then hopefully, as you get older, the self-awareness grows, and you give yourself enough of a chance to survive and grow into who you're going to be. And the tragedy being that some people don't, and you almost didn't.
Yeah, that's it. It's and I think young people especially, like, they do really have to take that deep breath and understand that who you think to be your biggest enemies in your situation realistically are probably your biggest allies. They are the people that you can depend on. And after I went through, like, after the triggering moment of my relationship ending and that starting the downward spiral, I came to terms with the fact that relationships come and go. The sun's coming up tomorrow, whether they're here or not.
Yeah, not the end of the world.
Exactly. The world's going to keep revolving. And so that's like a boundary that I then instilled in, like, other relationships, whether it be friends, whether it be partners, is that if you're in my life, great. But if you're not in my life, the world's going to keep turning. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world. And so.
And you can't put that much pressure on someone and on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And so becoming so dependent on people, it's such a hard thing for the other person, especially if they clock the fact that you're dependent on them.
Yeah.
If they've got a really high sense of, like, moral and integrity, and they're going to want to be there for you as much as they can if they feel like you're dependent on them, because they might then live with the fear of, like, if I'm not there for them, what happens then?
But then that's not a healthy way to have a relationship, staying with someone because you're afraid of what they might do if you're not with them.
Absolutely. And it's so sad, the amount of conversations that I have with people about relationships, friend, partner, it doesn't matter, where they go, I can't leave because if I leave, then they've said that they'll do this. I know this is not necessarily, like, the nicest thing for people to hear, but it's like, at the end of the day, you didn't come into this world to be at the behest of everybody else. You came into this world to look after yourself. And people are either going to be there to look after you and help you, support you along that journey, or they're not. And if they're not there to support you and help you grow and help you be a better person, if they're just going to be a burden because if you leave, this is the consequence of your actions.
Emotional blackmail,
then you've almost got to rip that Band-Aid off.
Yeah. And I think most of those people would know that logically to be true. But when love's involved and you have a deep affection for that person and the relationship's changed and now the reality isn't any good for them, but they care about who that person is, it's actually doing that is a lot harder in practice than in theory.
Every life lesson that I've got from battling mental health, and it's not like it's not relevant anymore. Like, I still have the things, like, you're still
a human, you're still alive.
Human. Exactly, exactly. Like, I still battle these things when they arise, but every life lesson I've learned has been learnt the hard way. You know, we talked just before about cries for help, right? Well, at that point in my life, there were multiple cries for help. I was really looking for somebody to just come to my aid and save me from the dark, scary thoughts. And it took one person. And I know that some people would look at this and think, oh, well, forgive my language, fuck it. But I reached out to somebody one day and I said that I wanted to kill myself. And their response was, okay, you're going to do it regardless. If you want to do it, you're going to do it regardless of whether I say to or not. But okay, if that's what you really want, you're not going to be around to see what happens afterwards. Nobody can stop you. And I was like, oh shit, they're right. They are right. Like, if I want to, I'm going to. But what am I missing? What am I going to miss when that happens? What's the consequence of my actions going to be? And it's kind of like this thing of like ripping that Band-Aid off, of going, if I stay in this situation, then you're still going to be the same person. If I leave this situation, you're more than likely still going to be the same person, but I can't be emotionally blackmailed by what you're doing. So if you're saying that if I leave, you're going to do this, well, you're going to do it regardless. So I can't be withholding that. And I guess that's passing the torch, right? Someone's dealing with their own mental health issues. And so rather than actually deal with them themselves, they pass them on to somebody else, which then creates more. It's like this, I've found to be this really weird flow on effect. And it's got to stop, like point blank. And it's like, if you've got something going on, if you're battling your own demons, they're your own, that's your own war to win, not to fight, to win. You're not gonna fight the war. You're gonna win the war, but you can't make somebody else fight it for you. Like, it's a very and that's, I think that's one of the harder things for people to deal with, is the fact that you're actually going to win this. You're going to come out on top. When? Who knows? But you are going to come out on top of this battle. You're going to win this war that's going on inside your head. All you have to do is take the steps.
But I think there's a balance between everyone being responsible for themselves, which I believe is true, but then not feeling like you have to fight whatever that is on your own.
Correct.
As well, right? Because that's the other side of the trap, when you have the mindset that you used to have, which was, these are my problems, the mindset that most men have, that so many human beings have, which is, I've got my own shit that I have to deal with. Other people have their own shit. So I'm not going to burden anyone else with it. I'm just going to deal with it. But then when that fails, right?
Yeah. And this is where I found the gym, right? That was a place that for me to fight my battles, but knowing that I had the support of others. Like, I was fortunate enough that when I started going to the gym, like, I was in a position where I was surrounded by community, but just people of the community, and the gym had a really good culture there as well. And that they contributed to saving my life. I've openly spoken to the girls at that Anytime Fitness, that like, they contributed heavily to saving my life at that point in time, because of the community and the culture that they'd built there, and the welcoming and warm feelings that they had. So it was like, okay, I'm going to the gym and I've got someone there helping me fight this battle. So it's like, I can't fight your battles for you. I can't lift that burden for you. But you know what I can do is I can help make that a little bit easier. I can help push you along that battlefield.
But you had parents that loved you and were there for you. You had mates, you had community groups that you were helping. What did the gym community offer that you didn't already have from them?
The gym community offered me an outlet. So I had friends and family and community groups where we could talk about things, and if we were struggling with something, we could talk about it and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't, for me personally, I can't say the same for everybody else, but for me personally, that gave me an outlet to actually let all the emotion out. I found myself more often than I care to admit at the gym, just doing something and then trying to fight back the tears, because I'd actually just let something out. I'd let that emotion out. I dealt with the I guess the physical side of whatever it was that I was dealing with at the time.
You were exercising demons.
I was exercising the demons, absolutely. And it's and at the end of the day, like, there's a video on my Instagram page talking about like why I became a PT and why I went down those pathways that I did. It's because I came to the realization that the gym doesn't care. Like, not so much the people care. And if you're in a good gym community and gym culture, then they care. But the weights don't care. The dumbbells don't care. The cardio machines, they don't care.
200 pounds is always 200 pounds.
Exactly right. Like, they don't, like, in that situation, it doesn't care about what you're going through. At the end of the day, like, you're just lifting heavy circles. And if that helps you lift the burdens of life, then that's the best outlet for you. I mean, you got to choose your evil, right? Some people, and I did, I chose multiple evils. I chose drinking. I chose drugs. I chose these different outlets, but then I found the gym, and that was choosing my next evil. Like, that was my outlet. That was the healthy outlet. That was the part that let all of that aggression, all of that sadness, all of that trauma go. I'd had conversations with counselors. I had conversations with friends. I had conversations with family. But what do I do with that emotion now that I've come in? I can cry about it. Yep, sure. That's one outlet. Did I cry about it? Yeah,
But
did.
physically building yourself gave you another.
Absolutely. Building confidence and conquering challenges. Like in a world where the gym community is so full of people trying to become bodybuilders and all these, we forget about where we start. And this is something I have conversations with my clients a lot of, is that especially the ones that come in with that anxiety of coming to the gym for the first time. It's like when we're in conversation, it's just you and me that matter. Nobody else matters. But you see everyone here at the gym that's got the massive muscles or have got the figure that you want. They started here just the same as you did. That person over there, they probably came in here on their first day feeling scared as anything, not knowing anything about the gym. And so you're not just going to get there overnight, but what you can do is you can build yourself to a point where you can deal with life's challenges.
Yeah.
Lifting that weight that you once thought you couldn't is going to help you deal with that next challenge.
The metaphorical aspect of it that
Yeah.
is massive, isn't it? Because I think it's one of the most A to B ways of becoming someone who does what they say they're going to do, and proving to yourself that you are worthy and building self-love and self-esteem. It's because if I didn't love myself, why would I put so much effort into trying to be bigger and stronger and healthier? And so through that action, you're showing yourself that you value yourself, and then you become someone capable of discipline and capable of showing up day after day. And then before you know it, you're applying that to other areas of your life, and then you become someone who can.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the world of fame and fortune, right? Where, you've got big name actors and musicians and all this kind of stuff. And you hear about how great life must be, but realistically on the inside, they're sad and they're depressed and they're lonely. And it's like, okay, like money, cars, houses, whatever, it's not going to fix like the inner problem. So you need to find an outlet that is going to be beneficial to the end of the journey, right? That's going to help you deal with all of those things. For some people, it's painting. For some people, it's music. For me, it was music. Music also contributed to saving my life. I grew up a musician, and so writing music and playing gigs and doing all these different things like that helped me, because it just gave me an outlet.
But
right?
that's another form of connection.
Exactly. But the gym's no different, right? There's a form of connection there because you can build relationships. The people in my life right now are the people that I've subconsciously been searching for years. In as much as I moved from Queensland to here, and when I came here, I was in the gyms, but I didn't have friends around. I didn't create friends. I went back into that mentality of I'm here for me and me alone. And I wasn't interested in building relationships. And then just this random organic group of people have just come into my life in the last month, 2 months. And it's then building that togetherness of like, it doesn't matter like what each person's going through in that community. We're building our own community of people that we can not depend on, but people we can go to. I think there's a big difference there between depending on someone and just knowing you can go to somebody. And again, it's building that outlet. I have clients that come in and they're not having a great day. I had someone just the other week come in and say, "Hey, can we do this today?" I go, "Yep, sure, no worries." Where's your headspace at though? Like, is your headspace where you just want to go through the motions of things, or do you need to exercise some demons? And it's like they need to exercise some demons. So that's my job then to then help them push through that they've got someone here that's like rooting for them every step of the way. And that's no different from a personal trainer like myself to someone that you can rely on in the gym, or even somebody outside of your outlet. My friends aren't musicians. My friends don't play guitar. They don't sing. They don't do any of that. Maybe they do their own carpool karaoke, but that's about it. So for me, trying to express that outlet of, hey, like, here's this song or whatever, like for them, it's lost. But hey, I'm playing this gig or I'm doing this. It'd be really nice for you to be there. They don't understand it. They don't get it. They don't get that that's my outlet. But just having that person, whether it be on the inside or the outside, that just supports, I don't have to rely on them. I don't have to depend on them to be there. It's just nice to know that they're there. I think is a really
and
good
to
thing.
offer that to other people too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this is like I do talk quite a bit in conversations about like the flow-on effects of consequences and actions, and consequences aren't always bad. Like your actions do have consequences, and they can either be good or they can be bad depending on what the action was. And so it's like, if they know that they're supporting me, well, then that creates a flow-on effect that they should be able to then turn to me and know that I'm going to support them in their endeavors and what they do. And that whether I understand it or I don't, whether I get it or I don't, that nonetheless, they've got someone on the sidelines going, you can do it, like that they've got someone there that I don't understand the reference, but I understand what you're doing. I understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And so whatever it is, you can do it. And again, that flow on effect, they were there to support me. I didn't have to rely and depend on them. They can rely on me to support them, and they don't have to rely or depend on me either.
It's what makes the world go round, man.
Absolutely. And there's the good and the bad of that. You've got the good side of that where that flow on effect of that support network, or you've got the bad side of that, like we said before, about like projecting your negativity onto somebody else, and then that creates that flow on effect in their mind.
What would you have missed out on?
Had I taken my life that day? Okay, to rattle off a few, I wouldn't have had the chance to go and educate people because I didn't have that education. I didn't get that education in school. I didn't get that education outside of school. I got that education from real lived experience. So I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go and educate those young people. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go and help be part of the community group that brought Headspace to my hometown, which I can't speak highly enough about Headspace in any conversation. That's the best place for anyone that's dealing with mental health. And so the fact that I was a part of the group that worked tirelessly to make that happen, I take great pride in that. I don't think I'd be a personal trainer if, like, I definitely wouldn't be a personal trainer if I had taken my life, but had things not happened the way that they did, I wouldn't be in the position where I am, where I can help somebody. I can actually change someone's life. There was a calling that I was looking for, is how can I actually help rather than be a hindrance? And, I wouldn't be in this. And I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed. I don't take anything that I've got or anything that is in my life currently for granted. So I'm very blessed that I'm still walking this earth, and I'm very lucky and very privileged that I have the ability to be a good impact on somebody's life. If I had taken my life, I would have been the first child that my parents lost. That's a hard number to deal with, and it was my choice. I have 3 sisters and I lost one, and it wasn't her choice. I had the choice to stay here or go, and I tried to go. She didn't get that choice. Life made that choice for her, and I would have missed out on seeing my grandmother for the last time. Had I taken matters into my own hands and fulfilled it, I would have missed out on those precious moments to be with my family and support my family and be there for them when they really needed it the most, and when I needed it the most too. I would have missed out on a lot, and all because it was my choice to miss out on it. Like, I made the choice to leave. Life gave that choice back to me.
Well, I'm glad you chose to stay, mate.
Look, I'm glad that I chose to stay. I'm grateful. You know what? I would go as far as say that I'm thankful that I went through what I went through. I'm thankful that I tried to take my own life. I know that sounds weird, right? Because a lot of people try to take their own life and are successful in that, which is sad. But had that not happened, you and I probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Had that not had happened, I don't think I would be in the position that I'm in life. I don't think I would have done the things that I've done. I wouldn't have been able to try and help people, not to say that I'm out to change the world, but, had that not happened, my life, I don't even know what that would look like. Would I have gone down a even worse rabbit hole? You know, would life have caught up with me and taken my life for me? Like all these what ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because it's not the life we're living. And I think that's the other thing, is that if you exit this life by choice, life still goes on. Eventually the crying will stop. Eventually your friends will live with the fact, but they'll move on too. Your family will live with the fact, but they'll move on too. There'll be moments of sadness. But it's like, if I had life would have gone on for everybody else. Everything still would have happened. Life still would have changed for others, but I wouldn't be around to know that. People would just go on living their life with a memory, and a tainted memory at that. Just know that life is still going to go on, but it's not going to be the same for everybody else around you, and your actions will have consequences. And it's like, you have the power to stop it, to stop the cycle. You've just got to make that change. You've got to put your foot down. You've got to make those changes.
Thanks, Connor.
No worries.
That's it for this episode. If you like what we're all about, support us by following Young Blood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Young Blood Mental Health on TikTok. Every podcast episode is recorded in professional quality video, and they're all up on our Young Blood Men's Mental Health YouTube channel. So please show some love and subscribe. You can find everything there is to know about the podcast at youngbloodmensmentalhealth.com. And most importantly, please share these stories with anyone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.